Hey, hey, welcome along, Infinite Beings. It's great to have you here again on the Infinite Me, where we're always talking about how to incorporate more of being infinite. You're already infinite and you already have all your powers. But yeah, it's about incorporating those and embodying those more in life so that you can express more as an infinite being, which is very cool. Yeah. So in case we haven't met before, I'm Nat over...
Mandy?
Wrong. This way. It's the opposite. There's Mandy. Yes,
Hello.
we are sisters. Everybody keeps asking. So yes, we are sisters. And we've come together to talk all about things to do with being infinite. So we've been having lots of fun just doing random live sessions. So yesterday we started a new way of choosing our topics. We'd often sort of sit there just before we got live. We went live and we went, what will we talk about? And I was like, oh, we could talk about this, we could talk about that. So we decided that we would do the infinite lucky dip. And we'd have a whole bunch of topics that have been written out, and we'll just pull one out on the spot while we're doing a live and actually start talking about it. So you can't get much more infinite and channeled than that, I guess. We don't have time to even think about it. But we are breaking protocol, having said that.
One day in.
We had one day of doing the infinite lucky dip, and now we're breaking protocol, because that's what happens when you're infinite. Nothing ever sticks. No, the main reason we're breaking protocol today and perhaps tomorrow is because we got two questions, funnily enough, almost with exact same scenarios from two of our watchers, listeners, and pretty much asking the same question.
Yep.
So to us, that's a pretty indicative sign that we're meant to be talking about that topic and addressing it right now in the infinite space. So yesterday we talked about consciously creating as opposed to creating by default. So we really made the point that you're always creating in every single moment, and it's up to you whether you want to create by default, which will always be your patterns and your beliefs, and you'll keep repeating the same thing over and over again. You'll keep having the same relationships, probably the same money issues, and maybe the same health issues as well. So, or you can step right out of that. And I guess that's why we're doing these sessions and speaking all about being infinite, is that you do have the ability to consciously create in every moment as well. And that comes from the most minute of decisions that you make moment to moment. And I guess we're just bringing more awareness to that in these sessions and how you do that. So today we are going to talk about how to deal with friends, family, loved ones as a collective, people that are going through hard and tough times, having a real shitty time in life, and how you support that person from an infinite space, how you support them from a human perspective. And what's happening is these two people feel like they're getting drawn into other people's drama. And they feel like they want to be there for them because they do love them and they genuinely want to help them, not from wanting necessarily anything out of it. So, but they're getting raveled up into that drama, and it feels like they're sucking their energy into those situations, and it's happening sort of quite regularly. So there's a number of people, for both people actually, that I'm speaking about here, two ladies. Both of them are encountering numerous people in their life doing this right now. So it's sort of quite interesting. It's not just a one-off friend. It's actually a number of people or family members. So interesting topic. And it is a big topic, so we're not going to get through it all today. We will just have a very brief overview today about the concept. And then tomorrow we'll dive in a lot more. Because there's so many layers to this when you think about it. And we were talking about it just before we got on. How we actually tackle this topic, because it is a big topic and it brings up a lot of emotions, a lot of ego, because they're your loved ones. You know, you want to help them, sort of thing. But so how do we best do that from a human space, but also an infinite space? How would the infinite view this particular scenario?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you want to kick off, man? Do you have some feelings about where we should start with this?
Yeah. But I think, as we were just saying, we've kind of just briefly kind of saying, how do we kind of tackle this? Because it is a big topic, as Nat just said. So it is, where do you kind of start? It is a little bit like which perspective do you start with? Because they all feed into each other, and there is like these different levels. As you know, the further out you go, the bigger picture you look at it, the perspective shifts. how you deal with it. So I guess from the where to start? I guess I'd say, like, I guess the overview sort of end point, if you like, is that from the infinite perspective, these people are characters in your story. So you're putting them into your story for some reason to be playing out this way as well. So perhaps it's an opportunity for you to practice the art of not getting drawn into people's drama. So it's a practice of detaching from the ego running you, if you like, and so you're getting lots of practice by having all these people outside of you supposedly needing your time and your attention, and you feel, your ego gets, out of that gets acceptance and love and appreciation, because you get to be that person for that, you get to show up and be the helper in that situation. You get to offer support, you get to be the friend, that they get to cry on your shoulder, whatever the situation is, coming about. But also too, my sort of feeling on that whole thing is that each person has their own journey. So it's not really up to us to rescue anyone from their situation. They're going through their own, they've created that in their story for whatever reason. We don't always know why things happen the way they do.
Yep.
And so it's, they're on their own journey. We don't need to get involved in it. Like, if anything, we can model by being our best selves and sort of living our life as an infinite being. We get to model that to the other people too, that it is possible. Like, you're calling them up to what is actually possible, rather than going down to their energetic level, if you like. So it's not in a derogatory way about going down to that person. It's more about their energy is at a lower vibration, if you like, when they're in their drama, and then you kind of lower yourself to sort of match where they're at, rather than maintaining your level of knowledge of knowing who you truly are, and then being like a rock for that person in the like perspective of inspiring them, like calling them up to a higher way of being, rather than, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
And then I'm just thinking around that whole thing about that person being on their own journey, like it also being about, we're not here to sort of rescue that person either, but that's where our ego gets kind of pulled into that too. So yes, they are maybe a member of our family and we do really love them. So it is coming from a true space. It's not saying that everything's coming from ego when you try to help somebody. There is definitely a true space, but we have to be careful when the ego starts to get a hold of that and starts to pull us into that, because it makes us feel uncomfortable to watch somebody else suffering, if you like. So we get pulled into it because we're trying to alleviate our own sense of uncomfortable feeling. Like, so we might feel we can't watch someone in pain. We can't, we don't like conflict, like whatever the issue is that's going on. Maybe someone's harming themselves or taking drugs or whatever, like, and we just know that they're not doing themselves any favors, but it pains us to feel like we can't help them, like we feel useless. So there's all these ego things that kind of come up that we're trying to alleviate as well. So as long as that there is that true feeling, but then it kind of goes into the ego domain too. So that's, to me, kind of feels like the higher level perspective of it.
And it is easy to get drawn into the ego stuff very quickly without even realizing it, I guess, because they are loved ones. And these scenarios, both of them have some degree of self-harm in its various forms. And that is even more difficult because there is that sense of, oh my God, what are you doing? Like, so you're outside of their story. They're actually in their story. Don't forget, we talk about being in the story or outside of the story, observing the story. You're outside of the story and you can see what they're doing. So it makes sense to want to stop it, because it is painful for you as well. And I think there needs to be some degree of an acknowledgement of how you're actually feeling about it. So it's always about you from the infinite space. True. It's never about the other person. It always is a projection of your consciousness. Don't forget, it's like Mandy was saying, it's they're playing roles in your story. So it's always going to be about you and what any situation, good or bad, makes you feel. So it's always a question to come back and ask yourself is like, what am I feeling about this situation right now? Not about what somebody else might be feeling. So they might be feeling okay about what they're doing.
True.
Ultimately, but I guess knowing that their infinite self is, even though we're all one, they're for the sake of language, there's separation.
Yeah.
So their infinite self is actually taking them on a journey as well. And to you, looking, from the outside in type thing, it doesn't look like it's a great story. It's not a story that you like.
Choose.
It's not a story that you would choose for yourself. I guess that then you have to have judgments basically on that. Like, for this to actually even occur in the first place, there has to be a judgment that what they're doing is wrong.
Yes.
And if we come back to sort of the higher level of the ego will always determine positive or negative, right or wrong. Like, it's always judging and labeling stuff. That's what it does.
Yes.
And it's almost like you've put yourself up on a pedestal, probably not meaning to do all this, like, mind you. But you've put yourself up on a pedestal going, I know better than you do. You shouldn't be doing this. What you're doing is wrong. And so you put them in the pit. So what unconditional love would do is bring it back into balance and go, I fully 100% accept what you're doing right now. And I'm not necessarily okay with it. But then you have a choice, I guess. Like, it reminds me a little bit of a relationship I've had where I didn't agree with what my partner was doing. So, but that's the way he wanted to live. And I had to sort of then accept that. And I was like, you know what? The most loving thing I can do is actually let him play out his story right now and whatever he chooses to do.
Yes.
And then I have a choice about whether I stay in that story or not. I chose not to, and I walked away. But I think when you're in the story and you're trying to influence it and stuff, you feel like you don't have a choice but to stay in that story with that person going through it. It's making you feel uncomfortable, so you want them to stop it.
Yes.
But by stepping back, and that point of unconditional love, we're not talking about human love here. We're talking about infinite, unconditional love. So, which, probably in most circumstances, the closest thing that we ever get to that is that sense of unconditional love for a child. No matter what that child does, you will probably always feel a sense of love for that person, for that child. So it's hard to approximate unconditional love in the human sense because we don't experience it very often.
Very
all the ego stuff. Yeah, the ego stuff always comes into it. There's always a story attached to stuff, so it's almost impossible to feel what unconditional love actually feels like. So, but that's the space that the infinite comes from. It is unconditional love. It has no judgment or anything. Nothing's either right or wrong, positive or negative. It just is. Yeah. So whatever that person's going through right now is just part of the story. It's not. In fact, if you look at the infinite side of it, they're not actually doing any harm to themselves. Like, it's impossible for an infinite being to actually be harmed at all. It's just in the human story, they look as if they're harming their body or their sense of self or, their beingness type thing. But their true, like, to really step out of it and play the infinite game is that they can't actually harm themselves. It's all being orchestrated by the infinite self at that time. And that's something that they need to be going through, just for whatever reason, whatever the bigger picture of that, like you were saying, man, like whatever the bigger picture of that actually is.
Yes.
And where it's trying to take that person to. And we all need wake-up calls, massive wake-up calls sometimes. Like,
true. Sometimes
you've been through it, I've been through it, like some massive stuff that really freaking hurts at the time. And to outside people, it must be even more painful to watch you go through that. And I get that. But you come out the other side and you're so much better for it. But it's almost like trying to wake somebody up is almost impossible because they have to do it. Like, they have to know themselves that, okay, this is not working for me anymore. Like, they have to come to that conclusion. And it does help maybe to point it out. I'm not saying don't ever say anything to them and just let them do whatever they want. But it's almost like say what you need to say and then let them go through their stuff. Because if it's landed for them and it's true for them what you've said, it has landed, and that will be part of their process. It will be a subconscious thing that will keep working on them.
In their own time they will come to their own. conclusion or not, depending on, based on what you think is the right way. But yeah, I think it is like what you said. You say what needs to be said, or take an action that needs to be taken if it feels true for you. Like it is an infinitely guided action or conversation to have. It's not an ego-based conversation of, this is making me uncomfortable and I want to fix it, which is probably 99% of the time where we do come from when we see somebody outside of us, suffering, in that story sort of thing. So, and I was just thinking there was something along the lines of what you're saying with people having their own journey. Oh yeah, it was like, it's kind of, I've heard this said before, which really resonated, was like, it's really quite arrogant of us as like a human. This is coming from an ego perspective. It's actually quite arrogant of us to assume that we know better for somebody else. Like it's that we, because it's all based on our own filters, like we've spoken about before. We're all looking at the lens, we're all looking at the world through our own lens, and the filters are like our belief systems, what's happened to us in the past, judgments that we have on others or they have on us, and we go about the world and we look outside of us and we see things that, oh, that's bad, this is good, this is a better way to be, that's slowing yourself down there, so we sort of see someone outside of us, like a loved one that's supposedly gone off track or not where we think they should be, or they should just get over a breakup quicker than they are, or whatever we think should be happening. So it's quite arrogant of us to assume that we know is actually what's going on for them, for a start. Like, we're not in their body, so we don't actually know what's going on for them. We can't see their thought processes, but also to know that, to think that we actually know better than they are, that they don't actually have their own infinite guidance coming through them. Okay, maybe they're not fully listening to it right now, perhaps, and that might be true, that might be the truth. But it's still basically saying, well, I know better than you, like what you were just saying. That it's like, well, I've got more guidance than you, so therefore I know your answers, which is impossible. Like, we can never know that wisdom for somebody else of what's going on for them and why they're going through that thing. And like you said, sometimes it is a wake-up call, and that person needs to get to the absolute rock bottom of whatever they're going through before they suddenly kind of feel to shift things around, or they get that insight, or they get that, I don't know, new lease of life, or whatever's going to come out of that situation for them too. So we don't know. That's the end of the day. That's the thing. We can just love somebody for where they're at. That's the best way. That's the other thing around love that was coming up, is that sometimes love looks like walking away from somebody. Sometimes love is being really harsh looks like being harsh with somebody by putting some boundaries in place, that no, you can't call me whenever you want. No, I'm not going to lend you money. No, I'm not going to be there every single time you want me to be. And so that might feel really hard, but it's only the ego that's filling that really hard space. And sometimes there is just a sadness, like it is just, we are humans and we value connection, and so there is, that's true, a grieving process. Like sometimes there is just that letting go sometimes of how things were. And there is, so it is just an emotion, like honor it, like let it come through. You don't try to block it off, but don't react out of that, I guess, is probably the better way to put it.
Because the person really, like, if they're going through a really hard time, generally it is a transformational time for them. That's why we have bad times. Because it's the time we finally pay attention. If everything's going really smoothly, we don't ask the harder questions. So sometimes we have to go through some really hard times to go through that. So that person is going to come out the other end as a very different person. If it's a really big transformation that they're going through, then they are going to be a different person. So there is that sense, and I think we've talked about this before, there's a sense of grieving because, we in our last conversation came from the perspective that you were doing the transformation, you were going through consciousness work and transforming, whereas your partner or your family or a friend may not be doing that. And so they go through a grieving process because you're changing. And this is almost the reverse of that. Like, they're going through a transformational period, and you're going to have a very different relationship with that person. You may not have any relationship with that person at the end. And that's the risk you take in this process, is that person, it might be time for that person to move on. From either end, they might decide to move on. Or you might go, this is just not working for me anymore. And that's what I had to do. And that relationship that I went through is like, you're not ready to change, and that's fine, but I am. And I don't choose this anymore. I don't choose to have this energy in my life anymore. So the most loving thing I can do is not try and change you or fix you or improve you or do any of those things, which is virtually impossible. The most loving thing I can do for you right now, the unconditional loving thing, is to leave and let you live your life. And that's what's happened. He's gone on to live his life.
Yes.
So I think there's great power in doing that. Like, it's hard.
Yes.
Definitely it's hard, but there is really a great sense of relief and power in perhaps walking away if that's what feels true. And it may not be forever. It might just be right now, like you were saying. Like, is like right now, I'm not going to be on the end of the phone every 5 seconds that you need it. You need to work through this stuff, and you need to find your own sense of strength and your own answers. That's the other, I guess, key thing, is that, like you were saying, man, you don't have the answers for what that person is going through. Honestly, you don't. You could definitely suggest things that are working for you or working for other people, or stuff that you've seen on the outside world that has, helped somebody go through this process before. But their process is very unique to them and what they're going through, and all the construct that has to decay and rebuild and all those things based on their childhood and their belief systems and what they've gone through in life and all that sort of stuff. No one will actually know that entire construct other than their infinite self. And it's being guided the entire time through that process. And that's where we have to trust that the process they're going through is 100% unique to them, and they have to go through it. And all we can do is hold space. And I think there's that element. There's probably 2 points here I want to make just before I go into that hold space part, is if everything is part of the infinite, because the infinite is everything, it's part of the one, then nothing falls outside of that. So all the thought processes they're going through, the actions they're taking, the belief systems they've got, all the stuff, the process that they're going through right now is part of the infinite. It can't fall outside of that. It has to be guided by their infinite self. So I think in just recognizing that, if you could just appreciate that, then there's a part of you that relaxes and goes, okay, that person I know is taken care of at the infinite level. I can just support at the human level, make them feel more comfortable perhaps. But at the infinite level, they are totally off. And you can trust that and relax into that. Now I've forgotten what the other point was.
It's about holding.
What was the other point?
It's about holding space.
So I feel like the most loving thing you could do is not try and fix, change, or improve, unless an inspired thought comes to you, and truly inspired thought, not the ego thought of, this is really uncomfortable for me, so I need to change something here. So I'm going to suggest that you do this, this, and this.
Or if the other person asks you for help, or you request, like you ask them to say, look, can I offer you some advice? So you're actually asking permission to, not just telling them, oh, this is what you should be doing as well. Like, ask if they would like to hear another perspective too. So, and it doesn't mean they'll take it either. That's the thing. But there is that whole thing about asking and asking.
At least you've got more of a chance of them taking on board if they've said yes to it, or they've asked you. At least then they're seeking some help. But yeah, holding space. It is just that. It's a really tough thing to do, but to actually just hold the energy of the infinite and love for that person, and just go, I'm here to support you in any way I can. Just holler. But if you don't need it, I'm just going to step back and allow you to go through your process. I'll be here when you fall. But this is a process you need to go through. You are strong enough to go through it. You're never given anything that you're not strong enough to go through. You will find an inner strength. That's what you're learning how to do right now as you fall over. But I'm here, and that's it. I'll just keep loving you as you are in every moment, as much as it might be pushing my buttons. I will just keep unconditionally loving you. And I guess that's, as humans, how we learn unconditional love and have experiences of that in the human form. Because you do experience that. Like, when you can really hold space for somebody, you feel nothing but unconditional love for that person. Because you don't need anything out of that situation.
Yes. Yeah.
So
True.
you are in
And I
that
think it
infinite
is
space.
just that struggle, I guess, if you like, that we have with defining love, because
Yeah.
99% of the time we talk about love, it is coming from a very human construct of what we think love is. Whereas that unconditional love that we're talking about from that infinite space, there is nothing out of place. Everything is perfect. It doesn't actually matter what is happening. We will label it as good or bad or suffering or pain, but to the infinite, it's just an expression. It doesn't actually matter. So this is where language kind of, starts to become a problem. So all you can do, like as Nat said, is you love that person as best you can, and that might look like being very strong in your boundaries, or but also saying, look, I'm here for you. I believe in you. You've got this. Like, you've got access to your own infinite nature too. And then you just have to let that person do, and it might still hurt. Like, that's the thing. It probably will on some level, because we're human and we feel stuff, and it's just part of our journey then, like, to feel those emotions too, and to take our power out of those stories as much as we can as well. Like, that's what we're here to do, keep reminding ourselves of that infinite space and stepping back into that. I was just thinking of a friend, which maybe we can jump into tomorrow, because it might, I'm just thinking it would actually demonstrate this quite well. Like a lady that I went through coaching program with, which I might ask her if I can share her story before I do, sort of thing. That might be a good thing to do. I don't think she'll mind, but I might ask her first. But it actually demonstrates, I'm just thinking, she really popped into my mind as you were talking. She actually demonstrates this whole journey that she's had to really step back from a really painful situation in her life and let it just unfold. And it's amazing how it has shifted around by her just focusing on her and not on the outside all the time, and how much it's shifted around. But I might check with her first.
I do want to touch on that tomorrow. Definitely check with her for sure. That's important. But I definitely want to touch on this and remind, I think it'll come up as part of your story anyway, but let's remind ourselves to talk about the work that you can be doing internally that will help them.
True.
Because everybody's a reflection of you, don't forget. So the best thing you can be doing is working on your own internal self and what's coming up throughout this process.
True.
To release them from it as well. As much as you release them releasing you, you've got to release them and your attachments to them. So let's talk about that tomorrow. And then also sort of, I guess, going to that higher level perspective and putting it back into the movie scenario again, because that can definitely help step outside of the story. And see that the person is also just part of the storyline and they're actually okay.
True.
So we'll put that into the context of the movie thing, because I think it really helps frame it. And take some of the pain away, perhaps. Cool. All right. Well, part 2 tomorrow. We'll pick it up where we've left off, and Mandy can check in with her friend, and we'll do this. I think this is an awesome topic. I'm really glad this has come up, because I think there's so many cool parts to this story and to this topic that we discussed that really do illustrate the infinite side of things. And what's really going on underneath everything, under the storylines.
True. Well, let us know perhaps in the comments if there's any feedback from today, like if this is like brought up another question around this topic, or it's like there's like another element that you're not quite getting, or whatever that is. Like, and we'll see if we can address it tomorrow as well. Perhaps.
100%. Definitely. Very cool. Thank you for the 2 people that wrote in with this question. And I think it's an awesome topic to talk about. It's really cool. All right. We'll pick it up again tomorrow. In the meantime, stop rescuing people and play your own infinite game.
Bye.
All right. Bye for now.